where does each Saints position group rank among other teams in the NFL? Now that we have a pretty good feel of where what the Saints' roster is going to look like going into the season, barring some late summer additions, let's go through each position group and try to gauge where they rank in the NFL. Some of the information is coming from ESPN's Mike Clay. He has a 2024 prediction guide where he just projects where every position will be. Let's start off with the quarterbacks.
I think, if you factor in everybody, Derek Carr, Rattler, Hayner, I guess Nathan Peterman to some extent is part of that group too, but he's not really part of my ranking. I don't necessarily know that he's going to be a part of the team. But I think when you do that, I think if you just go starters, I think we did this recently, and we had them somewhere 16 to 18, somewhere in that range, Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. I think they have a pretty good and exciting backup room, though. And I don't necessarily know that they have like the top backup in the league, but they have two guys that I think are exciting prospects for backup quarterbacks. And, I think one of the two is definitely going to hit. So I just think the value of the room overall, I think they're probably about 15th. I think they're probably right around average, maybe a tick above average. You have Hope in the room. I think Hope lifts them up a little bit. So I think they got a pretty solid quarterback room.
You're a little higher than me. I think when we did that exercise, I feel like we had Carr 18 to 22 is I think what we agreed on. When I'm looking at this list right now, there was like a solid top 16 that we all agreed were a little above Carr, and that doesn't include Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, if that excites you. But yeah, I think it was right at about 16. Then maybe Kyler Murray you had him higher than another list we looked at. He got to about 17. And then you're comparing Carr to Deshaun Watson, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Anthony Richardson, Russell Wilson. I'm okay with putting him at the top of that group. I don't know if I'm giving bonus points for Hayner and Rattler. I guess maybe
you wouldn't, but I think it's the whole group, right? We're doing the whole group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you rather have those two guys to have hope of development over someone that
over
has
Tyrod Taylor, or Jimmy Garoppolo, or Josh Dobbs, or I mean, there's a couple other teams that have that. Obviously, Atlanta has Cousins and Penix, and Detroit has Goff and Hendon Hooker, like kind of the same as that. I don't know that moves him into my top 16. I'll keep him probably right around 18th. As we've said, I like him better than Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. Like there's a cutoff point right around there, but he does not crack the Saints quarterback room does not crack the top 16 for me.
For me though, like if you're looking at the whole group, and then you got some guys that are kind of in the same thing, and then you start looking at who else is on the roster, and you go, what group would you rather have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that the Saints do move up. For me, they move up. Like I would rather have two guys that I'm trying to develop that might have a chance of being a starter in the NFL.
I gotcha.
They probably don't end up being starters in the NFL, but they could, and I like that hope. So,
but what I'm saying is the top 16. The top 16 was kind of unimpeachable when we did this. Like, are you moving them ahead of? Are you moving them ahead of Trevor Lawrence? Are you moving them ahead of Tua? Are you moving them ahead of Goff? Are you moving them ahead of Cousins?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reality where I would rather have the Saints quarterback room than Miami's, because I don't think Tua is getting you to a Super Bowl, and I think that you have a chance of having another starter in your room. So those couple spots are. I mean, I think if we're just ranking starters, it's different. But if we're ranking the whole group, like I got to look at the whole group, and I would rather have Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner in my room than some other guys, and then. There's just that middle tier. Well, it's not even the middle. It's probably like the third tier of quarterbacks in the NFL where they're all kind of in there. And, if you tell me that you have, Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers, that might make me like that room better than somebody else's quarterback room that's in the same group. So, I mean, that's just kind of.
Yeah, no, it's enough to make him clearly ahead of the teams that are headlined by Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith and Russell Wilson, for sure. But not enough to put him in the top half for me. And frankly, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are even more exciting than that to me. So barely top 20, I think.
There's some variations on this projection chart, but he has the Saints ranked at 22, and around that 23 is the Pittsburgh Steelers with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Kyle Allen. Those Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, those were both starters last year. So it's interesting. It's interesting that you bring up Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers, because those are two starters who ended up
two much better starters.
Oh no, for sure, no question.
But my thing is like if you had at that time, if you had the Chargers, 10th with Drew as a starter, and then you had Rivers in it, and it's like, well, I'd rather have this situation than these other three. Like,
Right.
I do think that, like, if we're talking about the group, like, we're talking about the group. If we're talking about starters, we're talking about starters. Obviously, though, I'm with Mike. If we're just talking starters, I probably got him around 18, but
Yeah.
I like the little bit of hope, man. Like, I don't think their quarterback room's like super trash or anything.
No,
I think they have
a lot of potential.
If you're telling me you're going in with this approach, with this type of guy, like, give me the lottery tickets behind him, and I'm going to take the lottery tickets over the other people all the time. And I think it's interesting that, Tua is a name that comes up. I think you give Tua.
Tua is right on the border. He's probably 16th of that top 16.
You give Tua this offensive system, and now all of a sudden he's viewed a lot differently.
Right.
It's we'll see. We'll see what these guys do for Derek Carr.
All right, now let's move on to wide receivers. Where do you have the wide receiver core ranked at?
Yeah, it's funny that we mentioned we're using this Mike Clay list because I used to work with him. I know how diligent he is. Obviously, he's not going to be perfect on a lot of this stuff, but we have a list of everybody's top 5 in order. And this was the biggest surprise on his entire list. He had the Saints at 28. And my gut was they'd be a lot higher. Now you scroll through everyone's team, and it a lot of teams do have a number one the caliber of Olave. Then you get to Shaheed as a number 2, and I guess it's fair to say he's probably right around the middle of the number 2s. And then lots of question marks after that. I like that it's young. That's my favorite thing about the Saints receiver room is what Rashid Shaheed could be, what Chris Olave could be, what Bub Means and A.T. Perry could be. But it's a position that we've talked about. Part of the reason why you don't invest tons and tons of money and tons of draft picks is because there's so much depth. There's not a lot of bad receiver rooms across the league right now. So my gut would have told me the Saints were closer to 14th, 15th, 16th, but it's a position that's loaded with talent around the league. I mean, 10th is Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp on this list.
Yeah, I think that ranking's insane. Like, I saw that and it kind of made me feel like the whole list was out of touch. And then I saw Ryan Ramczyk was listed as a start. Like, so I mean, there's things that I think you got to take into consideration.
Sure.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, them being 20, I went through it myself. I had them about 14th. I think 14th is where I had them. I can't imagine that there's 27 teams in the NFL that would say I would rather have this quarter. This
no question.
Let me trade rooms with you.
Right.
I mean, these guys are young. They got upside. I mean, I think it's an enviable room, and I think where it's at now is going to be different in the future. 28 was just kind of like, whoa, this is like, what are we basing this on? And yeah, because I mean, Chris Olave was 17th in the NFL last year, and I think objectively he had a down season. Like there was 3 acts to it: the opening act, the middle act, and then the final act. So if we're just going off that, I mean, there aren't a lot of teams with a better receiver than Chris Olave. Like he's a top tier, top half of the league wide receiver in a bad year. So I didn't agree with 28.
Out of curiosity though, I think we would argue that Olave is, if we were just doing number 1 receivers, Olave is probably right on the cusp of the top 10. I think 12th. I haven't made a list, whatever. Take everyone's number receiver off the page. How do you feel about Saints 2 through 4, 2 through 5? Like,
I like Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
I like the upside of A.T. Perry. I think they are missing a guy. I think if you give them another player, I mean, I think that's where you get into that like top 10. But I would rather have their guys and need one than have a lot of other teams' guys.
Yeah.
And
I like having youth there. For sure.
I think it's a good group, man. 28 was crazy. Like 14.
That was the biggest shock on this.
You know, if it was 18, like I'd be like, okay, I get it. Like they're kind of missing a guy. For me, like again, I went through what I felt about 14. I mean, there's a few, you know, it's like the quarter. There's a range in there, but I think they're in that range of being. I think the Saints feel good about their receiver room. Honestly, like I don't think they feel bad about it.
Yeah, they definitely should. On this list, they have the Broncos at 27 with Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds, and Troy Franklin.
That's not better.
Like that's
not better.
Nah, Chris Olave and them are washing that. Going to running backs, what do you think, Nick?
Running backs, I feel like they have a good running back room. I think it's a top 10 running back group. I ended up putting it 8th. I had San Fran, Detroit, Atlanta, Seattle, Jets, Eagles, Ravens ahead of them. You know, there's a couple maybes in there, but I think you hit that range again. So at the top of the range, 8, bottom of the range, probably 12. It's somewhere in there. You know, I do think Alvin's. I don't think he's had physical decline. I think Kendrick Miller's on the uptick. You know, Jamal, I think, can be a lot better than he was last year in a different scheme. I don't know if you consider Taysom in there. He's in there.
I do. I kind of do. I mean, if I had to put him with any group, I'm giving him credit for running backs more than tight ends because he runs more than he catches.
Here's the truth of the matter, and what we were saying last year, I think is still true now. And what we were saying last year is that they had too much talent, too many skill position pluses for them to be a struggling team that barely got to 9 wins. Mm-hmm. That hasn't changed. Like, that has not changed. So these groups, I think, are legitimately good. I think they underachieved in some spots last year, but I think they have a top 8 running back group. I don't think Alvin's declined. As I've kind of like contemplated it, I've shifted a little bit. Like, I don't necessarily know that Kendray's going to out-yard Alvin. Like, you see the system out there and everything, and it's like, damn, like this will be really good once he's in there. You start seeing it. I think Alvin's going to be really good. I think Kendray's going to be really good. So yeah, I think they're a top 10 running back group.
This is the position where what you were saying about quarterbacks, where you're talking about the group. You got to like this group. You've got, all pro caliber talent in Alvin, even though he's a couple years, but the league is getting older right now. I mean, the top guys in the league right now are still Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. There's been a few, Jahmyr Gibbses and Bijan Robinsons and Breece Hall's coming along, but they have not replenished the talent at this position. Some of these 28-year-old guys are still the best in the league, but they also have the youth in Kendre Miller. They have the depth in Jamal Williams and the wild card in Taysom Hill. I think they're absolutely top 10. I don't know if individually, I think Alvin might be about 10th individually. Mm-hmm. You would want somebody younger and rising probably more. But when you add depth, I think they're locked in the top 10. Maybe not top 5, but top 10 for sure.
There's respect for Alvin on here individually. They have him ranked at 10th, one behind Derrick Henry and one ahead of Joe Mixon. So that's about a fairish kind of range given his age and, his contemporaries and stuff like that. What do you think?
That's a big ranking for Joe Mixon, a little higher than I would have expected him to be.
Yeah. Let's go to tight ends. Are you including Taysom Hill? I know you said you would try to.
I think of him more as a runner. Mm-hmm. I guess you have to list him as a tight end. What do you think? Does he line up? In the past, he has lined up most as tight end, but he's catching so few passes that
that's the thing.
And I guess you can put him in that group, but he's not increasing the value of my tight end position necessarily. Mm-hmm. I would want somebody playing tight end who's a better blocker and a better pass catcher.
He doesn't move the needle for me as a true tight end. So
and here's one actually. We're using this list as a basis, but that's not the whole point. We're making our own opinions, whatever. They were almost a little high. Like when I saw Saints at 20, I'm like, oh, I guess other teams are in trouble. Like Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau. I think this has the potential to be way better than they were last year. I was higher on them going into last season, but the Saints need to show they know what to do with their tight ends. I don't mind the talent. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau. We kind of like what we've seen from Dallin Holker. Nick's talked about Michael Jacobson. Like, I think there's some potential here, but last year those guys might as well barely been on the team. They were using them so poorly. So it's up to the new offensive staff to show me if those guys can be top half of the league. Right now I have them in the bottom half though for sure.
What's your number?
I mean, I would have honestly guessed, like, without studying the rest of the league, my gut would have told me like 26th. Like but there's not a lot of sure thing guys around the league, but 24, 25, 26.
I went 20. I went 20, yeah.
You went 20?
Yeah.
Okay. The offensive line. Now, we haven't seen enough of Trevor Penning to make a complete informed decision, but based off what we saw Tuesday, where do you think they rank?
I can't take any value off of Tuesday. I probably got them 20 to 25, somewhere in there. Okay. And I think it can go up and I think it can go down. But I did a story recently, a study, like a lot of teams have really bad offensive lines. Like it doesn't take a lot to be an average offensive line. If Trevor Penning is formidable as a starter, even passable as a starter, like I think they get to like 16th, and then you add in the play action offense and all that stuff. And, I think you can take an offensive line that's 16th and make people believe it's top 10, top 5. I mean, the Saints had tons of injuries on their offensive lines for a number of years, got rid of the ball quickly. And, I don't know how many stories there were about how great their offensive line was and how great it was coached. And it was like, no one could get to them. Like it wasn't, so you can hide that stuff. And that's definitely something this offense does. But I would say, fairly 23, 24, 25, somewhere in there.
Interesting. A quick aside. I believe that Jari Evans, Carl Nix were great. Like, Jari Evans is probably going to get in the Hall of Fame. I think he probably deserves it. there were times where Carl Nix was playing even better, and I thought that was a huge piece to the whole Peyton Breeze thing. But then again, like I'm like, well, I mean, were they just very good and Breeze made them look like Hall of Famers? I think they were really good. I obviously think Teron Armstead was outstanding. I think Ryan Ramczyk was outstanding. But you covered Tom Brady for a little while too. Did his offensive lineman get way inflated the same way?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there were guys that left and would get paid too much, and it was the same thing. But then it was just like, well, Tom gets rid of the ball really fast, and wait, how come every offensive lineman they get works? Like that stuff helps. Yeah, it takes good to great, and okay to good, and I mean that was part of playing with quick trigger guys. Like they just didn't sit back. You didn't have to block very long. Like if you don't have to block very long, you aren't giving up a lot of pressures, a lot of sacks.
Your story was an eye opener for me. If we had done this based just on gut before you did 32. That story, I would have said probably 30, 31, 32, honestly.
Yeah.
And funny enough, so we're talking about this list that Mike Clay puts together. He has him 14th. Now, he has Ryan Ramczyk on the list. I know he's aware that Ryan Ramczyk dipped last year, might not be as aware that Ryan Ramczyk is probably not going to play at all. But he knows he knows Cesar Ruiz, he knows Eric McCoy, has Lucas Patrick as the left guard. He'll be competing for a spot. He was actually the backup center, and Nick Saldivaris at left guard, but he knows that's a question mark. And he has Tali Fuaga at left tackle. So he knows what they're working with, and he ranked that 14th, which just lets you know that the teams ranked 15th through 32nd have problems and holes and question marks. It's tough for NFL teams to put together good offensive lines. Everyone's got warts, is what that tells me.
Here's part of that too, and I feel like I know how he got to that ranking, and part of it, this is like an example of the film versus stats scouting. Like if you don't do both, you kind of have holes a little bit. It's impossible to scout every offensive line in the league. So I'm not saying Mike Clay should be doing a detailed Brandon Thorne level breakdown of the offensive line every week. It's impossible to do. But if you just go look at the stats from last year, they didn't give up a lot of pressures. They didn't give up a lot of sacks. It makes you think that their offensive line was really good, and it wasn't. Like it wasn't. You watched
looking at things like Next Gen has things like pass rush, win block rate, and like
just even pressure numbers weren't bad. But like if you watched it, it never felt confidence inspiring. So like on film, it kind of looked spottier than the numbers. You look at the numbers, and it's like, no, they aren't a top 8 offensive line. Like, but there were times last year where they ranked there in certain metrics that are widely used. So I think that's kind of how you get to it a little bit. But I mean,
I would want to see Brandon Thorne's ranking. I would trust Brandon Thorne ranking more than anyone who's doing this that's not deep diving. But the only thing that was eye opening is that combined with the study you did is everyone should be terrified of the Saints offensive line this year, but don't think they are out here on this island as the team with the offensive line problems. The league has offensive line problems.
No doubt about it.
All right, now let's go to defensive line. Let's split it up into defensive end and defensive tackle. Where do you think the defensive end position ranks?
Interior defensive line, I went about, 20th. Like I felt like that was a decent spot for him. I think there's a lot of things that could elevate it. It's just right now there's Brzee on the upswing, and then a bunch of maybes. Nathan Shepard's solid, and it's just they need some answers there. So we'll see how that looks. I think if the whole defense kind of comes together, like if you get some pass rush going, it's going to make your interior look better. If you're defending the run well everywhere, it's going to help your interior. So I think if the defense plays well as a whole, it'll help elevate that position a little bit. And then at end, I think I was about 14th, somewhere in there. But again, the arrow can go up and the arrow can go down.
I'm pretty down on interior defensive line because kind of like how we were talking about quarterbacks. If you're measuring them based on their alpha, they're pretty low on alphas. I mean, Brian Brzee is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting there. If you're basing them on depth, I don't like their depth. Like, I think I'd be surprised if every team in the league doesn't have a Nathan Shepard and a Colin Saunders. They feel like pretty replacement level to me. Solid. You can win with them. They're not going to be the reason you lose a game. Adequate. But if you're telling me that 30 teams in the NFL don't have Nathan Shepards and Colin Saunders, I'd be pretty surprised. So that puts a lot on Brian Brzee's shoulders. If Brian Brzee can get to near Pro Bowl caliber and lift that group up, then they can be a top half of the league group. Otherwise, my gut says, 25-26 with that group. I'm really curious to see what he can do with his game this year. Edge rusher, it's more about depth. They don't have – I wish they had the sure thing in the group. I mean, there are teams that have T.J. Watt, and there are teams that have Khalil Mack, and there are teams that have Myles Garrett, and the Saints don't have that. But I do love how it's 6 deep that you have guys that could potentially be really good. So that's an enviable thing to have. I think that probably puts them right at about 14. That's a good number.
Yeah.
Yep.
On edge, if they have Granderson with a copy and paste season as last year and Chase Young comes back serviceable,
Can be excellent.
yeah, I think they
10.
can be excellent.
That's the thing, is the depth. A lot of things have to go wrong
Right.
for it to be all wrong. But we've seen it, so it's definitely possible.
It's doable, yeah.
What do you like better? Running back or defense? Like the group of running backs, the group of defensive ends? Because we like the depth of both.
Give me the running backs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you have
It's similar in some ways, though, isn't it?
a superstar at running back, though.
Alvin's still superstar.
Yeah,
and that's
I mean,
like saying Cam's a superstar. Cam's dropped off way more than Alvin has, but you know what I mean. Like
I don't think they're comparable at all. where they're at in
you
their
still put
places in
Alvin
their
in the
career.
superstar
I
category.
think Alvin's. I don't think.
No, I know, but what I mean is like Alvin's been a superstar. You think
Yeah.
Alvin is
Yeah.
still current superstar?
Yeah, I think Alvin can still touch that. You
Yeah.
know, and I don't.
I know Cam can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to linebackers. What do you have them ranked at?
Fifth overall in the NFL. I think it's maybe arguably their best group of players. Maybe Commanders are better than them. 49ers have a better group. Jags have a better group. Jets have a better group. And then from there, I'll hear arguments on a couple other teams, but I mean, I think they're right there. I think it's a chance to be a really great group of players. Not a lot of teams. This is one of the weaker positions in the NFL too. There aren't a lot of good linebackers, and I feel like the Saints have 3 good to great players.
Yeah, the same standard I just used at defensive tackle. Where do you rank if you're just ranking it on your alpha? Top 5. Where do you rank if you're ranking it on your depth? Top 5. I mean, if Werner and Willie Gay are my 2 and 3, and Kalika Hudson's my 4, and I just drafted Jalen Ford, like,
It's a great
what's
group.
not to like?
Yeah.
What's not to like? Yeah, I mean, you said 5?
5.
Yeah, I'll go with 5, and 5 is possibly low. I mean, 49ers are the only group that I'm sure I like better.
Yeah.
The Commanders, they added Frankie Louvu, who did good in Carolina, but I'm not positive that he's not how we felt about Pete Werner a year ago. You know, like inflated by having maybe his best season. And Bobby Wagner, obviously, if he's still Bobby, you give him as much credit as you give DeMario Davis, but San Francisco's the only one I know that I like better than the Saints in the whole league.
Let's roll on over to the secondary. Let's split them up into safety and cornerbacks. Where do you think they rank at?
Those are 2 very different rankings.
Yeah, I think this is another top 5 position for sure. And if Kool-Aid's good and Alante takes the next step, it might be top 3. Like I think they really, and if Marshawn stays on the team, obviously that's the whole caveat. But with what they have today, May 24th, we're recording the show. Absolutely top 5. I like the Jets, Miami Browns, and the Cowboys. I think have a pretty interesting group. Bland, if he can repeat last season, I think they have a chance of being ahead of him. If he doesn't, maybe the Saints are top 4 of them, but they're in that top 5 conversation easy.
Cowboys are so interesting because both 2 years ago, Trayvon Diggs had this flashy season.
Yeah, I was thinking about him. Yeah.
That didn't have a lot of substance. Last year, Deron Bland had a flashy season, but every day, but the fact that they have 2 of those guys, maybe you like that better than the Saints. I don't even know for sure. Bottom line, if Marshawn Lattimore was coming off his 2021 season, which I think might have been his best season, there were no question marks about him whatsoever. I might be saying 1 or 2 or 3 for sure. He's my only question mark. I'll take Paulson Adebo next to any other 2. I'll take just drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry and have Alante Taylor competing for depth. Mm-hmm. I mean, I like the youth. I like the depth. I like the A+. I like the superstar. If I trust Marshawn Lattimore. And, I mean, you can't put him in the top 3 since there's a cloud surrounding Marshawn Lattimore. That sucks to have a cloud surrounding your best player. But if Marshawn Lattimore is showing up and playing, then they're top 3. So, outside of the top 5, only because of Lattimore uncertainty. Inside the top 3 if he's here.
Where you put safety?
My gut, and again, I looked at this list, my gut was, they're probably 20th, 24th or whatever. And then I guess they had him 19th, so it wasn't that much better. But it's just a reminder that this is very similar to what we were saying with the offensive line. First of all, some of the best safeties in the NFL are currently free agents because nobody's signing them. And so finding NFL teams that have like 2 surefire safeties is like, finding a needle in a haystack. So I wanted to say Saints are probably 20th, but you want me to put a top 10 together when I'm looking at these lists of NFL teams? I don't know if I can get to 10 that have any certainty. So I guess middle of the road almost. It's putting a lot on Jordan Howden's shoulders, though. He has to be a adequate level starter for them to be middle of the road, I think.
Yeah, I went 17th. I think Tyron's still pretty good. They got some players, but yeah, it's bad. But I
also don't love depth. This isn't third guy is Jonathan Abram, fourth guy is question mark.
Yeah. I could see him. I could see him adding somebody to this position. Like if the market keeps falling, I think they could. I mean, if the market falls enough, like maybe they go get a top of the market guy to bring him in. But I still don't think it's a position where they're chasing somebody. I don't think they're gonna go throw a ton of money at somebody. But they also might end up feeling perfectly fine about the position by a certain point. But I do believe that if they feel iffy about it, by that point the market drops slow enough and. If Justin Simmons is no longer worth $10 million and, he's getting 4 or 6 or something, like at that point, everybody becomes very affordable.
Yeah.
And
if they had Justin Simmons, how high did they go from 17?
I mean,
he's a good player, but
yeah. If they had 2 Tyrants, how high would they go from 17?
Yeah, I think that you're like looking at top 10. Yeah. I think Simmons was overpaid last year, but I mean, yeah.
So does the league. Obviously.
Yeah. Good point.
We'll see where it goes with the safeties. But let's finish it off with the special teams unit. Let's start off with kicker. What do you think, Groupie and Charlie Smythe?
We're breaking them down individually. Look, I don't think – did I buy Groupie when we did the buy stock? He was on my short list. If we had gone further in that, I want to buy stock in Groupie right now. I think Groupie could be the 12th best, 14th best kicker in the league. Fine. Solid. Like, I kind of feel like he could be – not Will Lutz when he made a Pro Bowl, but like a set it and forget it guy. I feel like Groupie could get there.
Did you see the other guy kick?
No.
I think it's a real battle.
Yeah?
I think it's a real battle. And I like Groupie.
Yeah.
I think Groupie's good. I think
Groupie did miss the first kick that I saw him kicking.
I think it's going to be a real battle. I like Groupie. I think Groupie's great. If they didn't bring anybody else in, I feel great about him. I think he had a great season last year. This other dude has a big ass leg, man.
Booed it. Yeah, he booed it for real.
Has a leg. Yeah, I feel good about this. Not good, but like if good is average, I feel like they're going to be probably on the right side of 17 at the end of the season. With however they go about it, I feel fine about their special teams. Even like we kind of hated the how they defended punts and punted and their philosophy and all that stuff, and like it still ended up statistically being solid. So I mean, I think. If 16 is solid, I feel good about their ability to be at 16 or better. And if we're talking kickers, I think Groupie's somebody that's probably going to be a top half of the league kicker.
Mike,
I'm looking at punter here real quick to see on solid because I know Headley's stats in particular didn't stand out, but nobody returned anything.
Dude looked like he improved though.
I know he had a great OTA.
He looked like he improved.
All right,
like last year, just even on a consistency level. Like if we aren't even talking about hang time and distance. Just on a consistency level, it looked like he really improved.
I was trying to look up punting while we're here, but where did that go? I thought I had a place to look that up, but no, I mean, punting, I can't put them in the top 20. I mean,
but if we're talking the collective of all special teams, like I think they're top half.
Are we allowing returns into that? Or are we just talking kickers?
Just like if we're talking kickers, punters, gunners, all that, like I feel like the collective is somewhere in the top half of the league.
Rizzy's unit, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people doing, I mean, obviously I love their coverage. I love their returns. If we're talking kicker, punter, they're in the bottom half of the league. But like I said, I think Groupie can get to just inside the top half of the league, or if he gets beat out, then I'd have confidence in somebody that was able to beat that out. Punting, I'm going to have to see more than one good OTA practice to go outside of bottom 10 in punting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, look, I time every punt. Like, dude was last year. It was like every 6 was well hit. Like he was consistently booming. Like it was like wow. Like it was eye opening. It looked like he really put in some work this offseason.